Hi again, dear 5th graders. In this video, we're again on page 64 in our English Plus book level 1, the blue book, and we're on page 64, okay. We have a reading passage about the timeline of the Olympics, which starts in 1896 and goes through some decades, even centuries, and which finishes at 2016. Now I want you to listen to the passage, I mean the statements in the boxes, then we will go on with practice 1. And if you're ready, here it goes.
Unit 6. Reading. Exercise 2.
Olympics timeline. 1896. The first modern Olympic Games were in Greece. There were silver medals for winners and bronze medals for second place. There weren't any gold medals. 1900. Women weren't competitors until 1900. That year, there were more competitors than spectators. 1912. There was an 11-hour, 40-minute wrestling match between Martin Klein and Alfred Assekainen. It was the longest competition in Olympic history. 1916. In 1916, 1940 and 1944, there weren't any games because of war. 1920. There wasn't an Olympic flag until 1920. The flag of every country in the world has got one of the 5 Olympic colours in it. 1924. In the first Winter Olympics in France, the Canadian ice hockey team were champions with 122 goals. 1936. 12-year-old swimmer Inge Sorensen from Denmark was the youngest medalist in Olympic history. 1960. Abibi Bikila from Ethiopia was the first African to win a gold medal after running a marathon without shoes. 1988. Table tennis is one of the most popular sports in the world, but it wasn't in the Olympics until 1988. 2012. Hiroshi Hoketsu was a competitor in a horse riding competition at the age of 71. 2016. In Rio, golf and rugby were events for the first time in nearly 100 years.
Okay, now you already have learned the vocabulary, you know what a winner is, meaning successful people, successful athletics in a marathon or in a race. You know that spectators means audience, in other words, the people who watch a sports event or an artistic performance, etc. You know that a medalist is a person who wins a medal in an Olympics or in a race, etc. Okay, now let's look at the first practice and question. What sports are mentioned here? What sports is the text talking about? The text is talking about wrestling in the third box. I mean the year 1912. Ice hockey is mentioned in the 6th box. Swimming is mentioned in the 7th box. Marathon is mentioned in the 8th box. Table tennis is mentioned in the 9th box. Horse riding is mentioned in the 10th box. And rugby and golf, they're mentioned in the 11th box. Now let's look at practice 2. I think you don't need to listen to the record again, just because we already have the statements, the written text here. Right, true or false? Question number 1. There were gold medals in the first Olympic Games. Is it true or false? It is false, just because there was There were only silver and bronze medals in the first Olympic Games. Number 2. There weren't any games in 1916. Yes, it's true. But I wonder if you know the answer. Why weren't there any games in that year? Uh, Maybe it's just because of the World War the First, just because the people, the whole world population was in a big war, which is called the First World War, and therefore people did not attend the Olympic Games. Third question, Inge Sorensen was a swimmer from Ethiopia. Is it true or false? No, it is false, because she was from Denmark. She wasn't from Ethiopia. Number 4, Abebe Bikila was a marathon runner. Is it true or false? Yes, it is true. And number 5, golf and rugby were Olympic sports for the first time in 2012. Is it true? No, it is false, because they were Olympic sports for the first time in 2016, 4 years later then. Now I want to go to the, pardon me, by the way, I want you to show the answers again. False, true, and false. Okay. Now I'm moving to the next page, page 65, and here we have there was and there were grammar patterns. But before getting started with this page, I want you to show our slide here. Guys, you know that we use there is or there are to talk about that people or things or objects or activities are present or are not present at the present time in simple present tense. For example, I'm looking out of the window right at the moment in this classroom, and there are some trees outside. There is some grass outside, there is some tall buildings outside, blah blah blah. But there aren't any students inside the classroom. So we use there is and there are together with is not or are not in order to talk about what things, what people, what subjects, what actions are available or not available at present time. But what if I like to talk about the past time? Here, for the past time, we use there was and there were patterns. Please look at the slide here. There is a luxurious hotel on the street now, but there was an old theater hall at the same place 3 months ago. The first sentence is about a present tense statement. However, the second sentence is about a past statement. Can we see the old theater here anymore? No, of course we can't, because it was there. There was an old theater in the past, but today there isn't an old theater, but there is a luxurious hotel on the street. Second example. Today there are big shopping malls everywhere. However, there were just some small stores and markets in the past. So again, we're comparing the present time with the past time. What about the third sentence, the third example? There was not any water for flowers in the vase, but there is a lot of water in the vase now. On the contrary to the first two examples, which start with simple present and which goes on with simple past, in the third example, we start with a simple past statement in the first sentence, and we go on with a simple present statement in the second part of the sentence. By the way, there was not structure can also be contracted as there wasn't. So we can also read and speak the sentence like this. There wasn't any water for flowers in the vase, but there is a lot of water in the vase now. And as for the last example, we have the plural form of there were part in the simple past like this. There were not or there weren't any kids in the garden in the lesson time before. but there are a lot of kids around in the break time now. So for singular nouns, we use there was or there was not. And for plural nouns, for plural objects, we use there were or there were not. Before moving on our book, I want you to look at this practice. Here we see a photograph, a picture called Piccadilly Circus, and the photograph was taken in 1896. I want you to look at the photo carefully, then choose the correct option regarding if to use there were or there weren't, there was or there wasn't. Just as a few examples to you, for example, hundreds of people. There weren't hundreds of people. There were maybe tens of people or dozens of people. Double-decker bus. There was not a double-decker bus at that time. Horse-drawn carriages, I can see 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think. So I can say there were many or there were some horse-drawn carriages. Any zebra crossings? I can't see any zebra crossings here. And by the way, you already know that we use any in negative statements and in questions. So this statement isn't a question, but it is a negative one. So we must use there weren't any zebra crossings. Some old buildings. Yes, of course, there were some old buildings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 buildings I can see in this picture about the past time. Traffic lights, again we have any here, so we need a negative past statement. There weren't any traffic lights. There was a flag on the top of the building on the left, a positive past statement. There wasn't a lot of traffic. Yes, to me there wasn't a lot of traffic. But there was a roundabout here just behind the fountain. And if you ask me, there wasn't a great number of tourists. Okay, now I'm again going back to our book. Practice 1. Complete examples from the text on page 64, then choose the correct words in the rules. An 11-hour 40-minute match. What should we have here? Of course, we need there was, because match is a singular noun. Any gold medals? Medals is a plural noun, so it should be there weren't, negative, there weren't any gold medals. So, as for the rules, we use there was for positive and there wasn't for negative with singular nouns, of course. Oops, okay. And we use there were for positive and there weren't for negative with plural nouns, of course. Now, let's all together fill in the spaces here in practice 2. The first marathon. 2,500 years ago, there was a war between Greece and Persia, and there were a lot of battles. There was a big battle in a place called Marathon, which the Greeks won. By the way, won is the verb 2 of the verb to win, which is an irregular one. This was important news, but there wasn't any internet and there weren't any telephones. So a man called Phidippides ran to Athens with news of the battle. Ran is the verb to form, simple past form of the verb to run, which is an irregular verb. He ran about 41 kilometers. There weren't any good roads, so it was a difficult journey. When he arrived in Athens, he died because he was so tired. Now in practice 3, I want to complete the sentences with my own ideas, and I recommend to you to do yours similar to mine. For example, 2,500 years ago there weren't rich footballers to me, but there were some chariot races. There was a country called Persia, but there wasn't a sport called skateboarding. There were messengers, but there weren't any iPads. Now that you know where to use was and where to use were, let's look at practice 6. Hiroshi Hokatsu was a competitor. Singular subject, he was. It wasn't in the Olympics until 1988. Golf and rugby. We have two subjects here, guys. Please be careful. This is a plural subject, so golf and rugby were events for the first time. And women competitors until 1900 but men. We have another plural noun here, so it should be also depending on the meaning from the text, were not competitors until that time. So as for the rule part, was and were are the past forms of is, am, and are. For practice 7, in the past, things were different. Sports stars were not richer. This is my personal opinion. Maybe you have another opinion, why not? I was, of course, younger. Everest was not higher. It's the same, tall. But transport was, of course, slower. And people were not taller. Now let's finish this page with practice 8. I want you to use was and were for singular and plural subjects using your own ideas. Okay, to me, I was born in Burdur. When I was younger, my favorite sport was table tennis, but today my favorite sport is not table tennis, it is volleyball, for example. The number 1 song last week was Rihanna song blah blah blah, I'm just making it up. Number 3, my great-grandparents' names were P and Q, just because, to be honest, I don't remember their names. Number 4, my favorite film last year was Terminator 6. When I was younger, my hobbies were traveling and reading books, but today my hobbies are swimming and knitting, for example. And my last meal was pasta with chicken. Okay, before finishing this part of the video, I want you to keep in mind that was and were and there was and there were, they're all about states in the simple past. See you in our next video regarding the action verbs in simple past.